Plus, I'm Joy Lim Nakrin here with attorney Josh Schiffer. Thanks so much for being here with us, Josh.
Hey, Joy, what a historic day we're having here in Georgia. The whole nation is staring at President Trump's case up in New York because next stop's down here in Fulton.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Josh, of course, just to kind of get our viewers up to speed on what's happening, we're talking about the hush money trial happening in New York, and it's day 2 of deliberations before a jury, there. And, we've been talking a little bit off camera. This jury has asked for the jury instructions to be reread. Apologize, I'm having a little issue with my graphics here, multitasking. But the jury has asked for the judge to reread the jury instructions because we're talking about 34 counts and 55 pages of jury instructions. You say that's good they're re-asking, right?
Yeah, I really view this as an encouraging sign. To catch everybody up, yesterday the case closed. Evidence was finished, the arguments, the closing summations were performed, and after that, Judge Merchan read the jury instructions to the jury, to the 6 alternate jurors, and everybody else that was in court. This is a long document. This one was apparently around 55 pages. It outlines all of the law as well as the rules that the jury is supposed to follow while rendering their decision. And that's a pretty complicated task if you
Former
ask
President
anybody.
Donald Trump expressed his frustration as he returned to a Manhattan courtroom where a jury is deciding his fate.
Here we go again. We'll be here, it looks like a long time. Thank you.
The jury requested to rehear jury instructions and portions of testimony from David Pecker, the former public
testimony that was previously offered from some of the parties in this case, specifically testimony involving Mr. Cohen, Mr. Pecker, some of the exchanges. So this morning when the court began, Judge Merchan began by doing exactly what the jury requested. He read to them the jury instructions. In New York, just like here in Georgia, you don't send a copy of the jury instructions back with the jury. It's oral only. And in fact, the law prohibits in some cases sending back these instructions. So just like Georgia, this jury had to remember what was read to them during this kind of hour and a half recitation of the driest material you've ever seen. So this morning they went and reviewed that orally. They also went over a substantial portion of the testimony that was important for their decision process, and now they're back in that jury room deliberating.
One of the things, and I was about to comment, well, and most of them are not lawyers, and so if you're talking about 55 pages of jury instructions and 34 counts, I mean, that's really a lot to sift through. Interestingly enough, though, there are 2 lawyers on the jury.
There are 2 lawyers, and they're pretty sophisticated, we assume. There's also a few other very educated and experienced jurors, as well as kind of a pretty broad selection of Manhattanites. Now, everybody obviously believes that they're going to trend left, trend Democrat. I caution people, don't believe that a jury's just going to vote along political lines. While that's certainly an influence, I believe with a case of this importance, it's not something where a jury's going to disregard their sacred duties just to follow a political line. What we're going to see later today is hopefully some sort of verdict, and it could come at any moment. It could be coming right now, or they could keep working all day today, into the evening, all day tomorrow. Judge Merchan is not going to stop this jury until there's a verdict or the jury returns and says we can't reach a verdict, at which point he would likely drop an Allen dynamite charge and see how that goes.
Well, and I would guess that this jury is going to take their time because, yeah, I mean, sad to say, tell me if I'm wrong, but I do think in some cases the jury is like, okay, it's 5 o'clock on a Friday, let's wrap this thing up so we don't have to be back here on Monday. But I don't think that's the case here because there's so many eyes. I mean, the eyes of the world are watching the outcome here. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely agree, and it's very difficult to speculate on what this particular jury is doing. This is a non-traditional crime. This is novel. Everything about this case is unique and historic, and the jury absolutely knows this. I believe the jury is being extra thorough, extra diligent, because they know when they walk out of that jury room, they're going into a world where they're instantly famous and maybe not well-liked by certain members of society. So they're going to take their time and do their job right.
No, absolutely. And again, you keep saying historic. It absolutely is historic. Let's not forget that if they do find Mr. Trump guilty on any of the 34 counts, it would be the first time that a former president has been convicted of a crime, right?
Yeah, absolutely. This is the first time we've had a president up on criminal charges. Certainly the first time we've ever had a criminal trial with a state prosecuting the former inhabitant of our nation's most powerful individual office. And there are big questions about what happens at the conclusion of the trial, whether the former President Trump would face any real incarceration. And then again, what's the impact on our upcoming election? Many people feel that a conviction would move the needle one way or another, generally to benefit the Democrats, but there are a lot of questions about that. The press and the general conventional wisdom is that former President Trump has leaned into this prosecution, has made it a central focus of his complaints against Joe Biden and the Democrats, and I believe he leans into whatever happens, no matter what the result is.
No, absolutely. I think you're right about that. In terms of the impact, we're talking about the impact on the election. What about the impact on the election interference case here in Fulton County, Georgia? Whether there's a guilty verdict, whether there's a not guilty verdict, whether there's a split verdict, will it impact things?
There's a tertiary impact, but it's really very minimal due to the differences in what the charges are. The charges here in Georgia are far more serious.
Yeah.
They carry far more jail time. The actions alleged are much more aggressive from DA Fani Willis's office. But obviously, we're not going to get to see much about that case before the November election. As it stands right now, the disqualification appeal, which was brought by President Trump's team and the co-defendants to try to force Fani Willis off of the case and disqualify her office, that's currently pending at the Georgia Court of Appeals. And while that process is moving in a timely manner, it's never going to be fast, and no one expects the Court of Appeals to be done with their work and issue an opinion in time to try President Trump in Scott McAfee's courtroom in Fulton County before November.
Well, here's the thing. Of course, in theory, on paper, technically speaking, whatever happens in New York shouldn't impact what happens here in Georgia in terms of the election interference case. But judges are human beings, right? I mean, the legal system is comprised of human beings, whether it's people on the defense or the prosecutor's office. So do you think that it could impact maybe legal strategy, for instance, or how quickly the Georgia Court of Appeals moves on the disqualification issue? Do you think it could have impacts?
Well, one of the most important impacts of this New York case is it's the test run. It's the trial run. No one's ever put a president on trial before, and former President Trump has an outsized and large personality, to be generous. Half the story about this trial has been what former President Trump has been doing outside of court, how he has butted heads with the judge involving the gag order. That gag order obviously ends when this case is disposed of. So I believe it's impossible to fully insulate Fulton County from all the actions that are happening in New York. At the same time, the prosecutions are completely independent from each other. But I know that Fani Willis's office sent representatives to observe this trial. I know that Steve Sadow and that universe on the defense is closely paying attention to every action, because everybody wants the advantage when President Trump faces Scott McAfee and Fani Willis in Fulton County.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so when Fani Willis has representatives up in New York watching this trial, what do you think specifically are they watching for? Is it to kind of, are they looking at legal strategy and maybe taking notes on what they should and shouldn't do?
I think with any case of this notoriety, you're going to have learning opportunities for seeing how another office dealt with similar issues. We're talking about a press push of unbelievable size. How do you manage that when you're trying to prosecute a case? The DA's office has a huge number of responsibilities when it comes to a prosecution, and they do not want to walk away with egg on their face. They've already had some unforced errors that have slowed down the process, and former President Trump and the co-defendants have maximized some of those gains. Obviously, we're not getting the case tried before November, which was a huge goal of the defense in this case. So with the observation of the trial, Fani Willis's office is just going to learn a lot of the squishy edge and fringe bits of how do you put a former president on trial. They're also going to watch his demeanor and mannerisms closely, because they're going to want to know about that.